This podcast contains explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. The following program presents an examination of a criminal investigation. Any individual who may have been investigated or faces criminal charges continues to be considered innocent until proven guilty.
911, what's your emergency? My granddaughter has been taken. She has been missing for a month.
Her head, it's bleeding severely. We need an ambulance.
This is Marcia Clark Investigates the First 48, the podcast. I'm Marcia Clark. On my A&E show, Marcia Clark Investigates the First 48, we took a deep dive into the Chandra Levy case and uncovered compelling evidence that wasn't widely known. But as with all the cases we investigated on the TV show, there were aspects we didn't cover, and there are some issues that are best explored in a podcast. Today, we're going to explore confirmation bias. It's one of the key reasons investigations can go tragically wrong. What's confirmation bias? What it means is that in a police investigation, the police start by targeting the most likely suspect, and then they narrow their focus to the evidence that fits their theory. This is criminologist Dr. Kim Rossmo, an expert on the subject of confirmation bias. Throughout this episode, I'll be jumping into a conversation I had with Dr. Rossmo about the Levy case.
There's three forms of confirmation bias. One is you take a look at the evidence that supports your theory and you give it more weight than you should. The other one is you take a look at the evidence that is pointing away from your theory and you denigrate it. You say, oh, that's not good, that's not reliable. The third type is a memory issue.
So confirmation bias can lead to tragedy because it causes the police to overlook or dismiss evidence that points to a different suspect, the suspect who really did it. And that's how you wind up with wrongful convictions. But I want to make one caveat. I'm not saying police or investigators do this on purpose. It's not a conscious thing. It's a subconscious mindset that grows out of an investigator's experience of seeing certain common themes and patterns that recur over and over again. For Rossmo, the idea of confirmation bias is part of a wider category he calls investigative failure.
A wrongful conviction is a criminal investigative failure. Not solving a crime that could have been solved is a criminal investigative failure. And ignoring a crime is also a type of criminal investigative failure.
So today, I'm going to tell you the story of the Chandra Levy case, a case where confirmation bias changed everything. It starts in 2001. Chandra Levy was a 24-year-old grad student who'd moved from Modesto, California to Washington, D.C. to do an internship with the Bureau of Prisons. She wanted to be an FBI or CIA agent. On the morning of May 1st, 2001, Chandra was planning her trip home to Modesto. She was going back to attend her graduation ceremony from USC, maybe to stay. Her internship in D.C. was ending. That morning, she emailed her parents about possible flight options home. But that afternoon, she left her apartment on DuPont Circle and disappeared. 5 days later, her father, Robert Levy, called the police and reported her missing. Police didn't find any signs of foul play at her apartment. They had no leads. But Chandra's father looked through her phone bills, and he found that there was one unfamiliar number that appeared over and over again. It belonged to Gary Condit.
And that really blew things up.
Condit was the congressman for the district where the Levys lived. Chandra's father called Condit and left a message at his home. When Condit returned the call, he promised to help and said he'd put the money up for a reward for any information leading to Chandra's whereabouts. A few days later, Chandra's aunt told detectives that Chandra had confided in her that she was having an affair. The detectives called Condit. He denied it. He said they were just friends and that he hadn't seen her for weeks. The next day, detectives went to his condo and questioned him in person, but he denied the affair again, said that he hadn't seen her and that he didn't know where she was. The detectives got a warrant for Chandra's apartment. They found 2 messages on her answering machine. Both were from Condit. In those messages, he said he was worried about her, that he hadn't heard from her. Chandra's laptop was open on her desk. A sergeant tried to search her browsing history, but he wasn't tech-savvy. All he managed to do was corrupt the search history. That mistake cost the investigation dearly. It took weeks for the FBI to retrieve the information, but when they did, they found that on the afternoon she disappeared, Chandra had searched the website for Rock Creek Park. Now, Rock Creek Park is a famous landmark in Washington, D.C. When I lived in Maryland, I went to that park a bunch of times. It's huge, 4 times the size of Central Park. It stretches from Washington, D.C. into Maryland. On the day Chandra checked out the park website, it was a nice spring afternoon.
So you got involved in the Chandra Levy case, correct?
That's correct.
Can you tell us how?
I was approached by an FBI agent and a homicide detective with the Washington Metropolitan Police Department. They said that there was this case of a missing intern. No one really knew what had happened to her. This is 2001. But really at that point in time, all we could do was pose some questions that we thought would be worthwhile for the investigators to try to get answers to help narrow down on the different options. Like, has she just run away and not told anybody? Was she a victim of foul play? Had she been in an accident? So really, we knew so little at that point.
Police immediately theorized that she'd planned to meet someone there. But I'm not sure why. To me, it seemed much more likely that Chandra simply wanted to visit the park, that she hadn't had the chance to visit it before, and she was leaving D.C. and didn't know whether or when she'd be back. But for some reason, the police didn't see it that way. In fact, they doubled down on their theory and decided that the person Chandra met in the park was probably Gary Condit. After all, Chandra's aunt said they'd been having an affair, and they knew he'd left 2 messages on her phone, so they figured he was lying when he said they were just friends, and his condo wasn't far from the park.
So there was no reason for Condit to want to meet her there. They had a place to meet, and if he did want to do something bad to her, if he did want to kill her, why would he want to do it in a public place like that? So these assumptions that seemed to guide the investigation early on just made no sense to me.
Marcia, when I was a police recruit, one of my trainers wrote on the blackboard, assume. He underlined the word with 3 separate lines, and he says, if you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. It's an illustration of the danger of assumptions. Investigations are going to require them. You need to know what they are and what you're basing them on. In this case, all you knew was that she had an interest in Rock Creek Park, and she might have gone there. She might not have gone there. Why she went there is open to any number of possibilities, all of which have to be juggled. Unfortunately, some of the research we've done points to the pernicious effects of a rush to judgment. You make a premature shift to a suspect-based investigation, you stop looking at the evidence, and then everything starts to get interpreted a certain way. This leads to tunnel vision and confirmation bias.
But it was like police and the media were spinning in a loop, and neither was willing to stop.
Which was unfortunate because it was pretty clear from the beginning Condit didn't have any opportunity to have committed the murder. He had no reason to, so it was a red herring.
Over the next few weeks, stories about Condit's alleged affairs with other women flooded in. Condit said these rumors were irrelevant to Chandra's case, and he was right. But detectives thought those stories increased the likelihood that Condit was involved in Chandra's disappearance. And all this focus on Condit convinced Chandra's family that he must know something about what happened to Chandra, and they begged him to tell what he knew. Now, bear in mind the well-known rule that if the case isn't solved within the first 48 hours, the chances of solving it drop by 50%. Not only was it well past the first 48 hours, entire weeks had passed as the police continued to focus on Condit and got no closer to solving the case. Critical evidence had already been lost. During this time, Condit wasn't hiding from the police. In fact, he'd met and cooperated with detectives. And although he didn't want to go into detail, he did tell them to assume he'd had an affair with Chandra. And most importantly, he told the detectives he had an alibi.
What was the congressman's alibi? That's after the break.
If you're fascinated by the cases that we're investigating in this show, I highly recommend checking out Law School for Everyone from the Great Courses Plus. You'll get fascinating insights from 4 top law professors who explore some of the most important, decisive, and controversial court cases in American history to illuminate the inner workings of our judicial system. You'll find out about historical decisions like the Miranda decision. I also think it's cool that they talk about how lawyers craft opening statements. It's always fun to hear about another lawyer's strategy. As someone who's curious and loves to learn, I'm a big fan of the Great Courses Plus. and you get to learn from engaging, award-winning professors and experts about just about any topic: history, forensics, psychology, the arts, even how to cook or take better photos. You'll get unlimited access to over 9,000 lectures,
with flexibility to watch from your TV, your laptop, your tablet, or your smartphone, or listen with the Great Courses Plus app.
and for a limited time only, they're giving my listeners a free month of unlimited access. So, sign up using thegreatcoursesplus.com/MCI. That's thegreatcoursesplus.com/MCI. We're back with Marcia Clark Investigates the First 48, the podcast. And before we left, Condit was just about to remove himself from the list of suspects. Condit said he'd worked all day on May 1st, the day Chandra went missing. In fact, he'd had a meeting with Vice President Cheney that afternoon. There was a record of this meeting. Plenty of people knew he'd met with Cheney. In fact, they saw him in his office at Capitol Hill. He left briefly at 5 o'clock for a doctor's appointment, and then, by 6 o'clock, was back in the House, voting on bills. Back to my conversation with Dr. Rosmo.
It seems as though they should have pulled off of Condit the minute they saw he had an alibi. What do you think?
I think they should never focus on Condit in the first place. All he was a possibility. So the narrative here was powerful. Oh, we got an older congressman, politician, and having an affair with a young, intern. It just made for, a huge news story that kept going and kept going. I lived not too far from Adams Morgan, where Condit had his condominium. And I remember walking by his place and literally seeing the reporters camped out front of his front door in lawn chairs waiting for him to show up. And this was months after she had disappeared.
At this point, I wanted to hear from someone who'd worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C. Tim Hafey was an assistant U.S. attorney in the D.C. office during the Levy case.
Yes, I mean, it seemed like once he was ruled out or his alibi checked out, then they were flummoxed. They weren't really sure what direction to go in, because they certainly spent a lot of time in the beginning focused on Congressman Condit.
But it seemed to me that even after they learned about his alibi, the focus of attention stayed on Condit, and they continued to investigate him and look into his involvement.
You're right, Marcia. There was a lot of focus on him, and it was public focus. And it was really clear to everyone in Washington that he was a suspect. And it's obviously very difficult to conduct an investigation of that level of notoriety when every move that they make, every subpoena they serve, everything they do is scrutinized and reported on. And that was certainly what was going on with respect to this investigation.
It's months into this investigation, and all that's been done is research Condit. Up until now, the case was a clear example of confirmation bias at play. This is the very definition of confirmation bias. On its surface, the theory that a married congressman might kill his young mistress to avoid a scandal makes sense. The problem is, that theory just didn't fit the evidence. And for a lot of people, that's where Chandra Levy's story ends, except it doesn't. Back to my conversation with Dr. Rosmo.
Why not look at the crimes happening in the park, if any? It just feels like a logical step.
So, let me go back in time. We knew that Chandra Levy really didn't have many friends or associates in the Washington, D.C. area. So this was a very small pool. Well, once you get rid of the more likely possibilities in terms of, relationships, etc., then you have to consider the possibility of a stranger attack. And the really unfortunate thing here was that there was a very good suspect who had attacked two women in Rock Creek Park.
Ingmar Guandique was a 19-year-old undocumented Salvadoran immigrant. He lived across the street from Rock Creek Park. On the day Chandra disappeared, he didn't show up for work. And that night, his landlady noticed that his face was bruised and beaten. He looked like he'd been in a fight.
At the same time, he started drinking heavily, using drugs. He started having issues with not showing up at work. He had become violent towards his girlfriend.
1 week later, Guandique got caught breaking into a neighbor's apartment. He wasn't in jail long, and just a week after that arrest, Guandique was out, and he attacked a woman who was jogging through Rock Creek Park. She fought back, and Guandique fled. She reported the attack to park police, but she couldn't identify the suspect. 7 weeks later, Gwandike struck again. He attacked another woman who was jogging in Rock Creek Park. This woman fought back too. Gwandike again fled. She also reported the attack to park police, but this time, the police got an identification. She positively identified Gwandike as her attacker.
He had a knife in both those attacks. He approached the women and would run up and grab them when they were on remote jogging paths in the park. One of them had seen him hanging around a parking lot by Pierce Mill earlier, and that's probably where he picked her up and started following her, what we would call a fishing hole, a good place to find potential victims, but not a good place to attack them because there's too many other people around. So then they will follow them till you get to a more remote location.
Now, I should add right here a little description, because you're probably wondering how Gwandike could possibly have killed Chandra Levy if he wound up on the losing end of the other two attacks. Gwandike was small, just 5'7" and skinny. Both of the women who reported the attacks in Rock Creek Park were bigger than him and in much better shape. But Chandra Levy wasn't. She was petite, just 5 feet tall, and barely over 100 pounds. After the second attack, Gwandike got arrested by the park police. He was questioned by officers, and he wound up admitting that he'd made contact with both women, though he denied having attacked them. He claimed he'd just bumped into them by accident. One of the officers present made the connection. He showed Gwandike a picture of Chandra Levy, who by then had been missing for almost 2 months. He asked if Gwandike knew her. Gwandike said he'd seen her once when he was hanging out in the park. The officer asked whether Gwandike might have bumped into her too. Gwandike admitted he might have. That answer was a huge red flag. It showed he did have contact with Chandra, and that he was afraid the police would find evidence of that contact.
What happened next is confounding and continues to confuse me.
Although the park police wrote up the reports on the two women joggers, they didn't include any mention of what Gwandike had said about his contact with Chandra. Now, to be clear, the park police didn't have jurisdiction over the Chandra Levy case. The Metro Police did. But the Levy story was everywhere. It made the national news, and it was definitely top of mind for everyone in the D.C. area, especially law enforcement. So it makes no sense that the park police didn't tell the Metro Police what Gwandike had said, let alone put it in writing.
Given the publicity of the Chandra Levy disappearance, you'd think they wouldn't even have to ask, do you have any other crimes that might be connected to it? It was a glaring omission.
And beyond that, it makes no sense that the park police didn't give Metro Police the reports of the women joggers who were attacked by Gwandike, or that Metro Police didn't seek out reports of women being attacked in Rock Creek Park once they found out that Chandra Levy had visited the park website and downloaded a map of the area the day she disappeared. Instead, they kept chasing Gary Condit. Condit hired a private polygraph expert, and he passed the test, but the detectives dismissed the result, saying it was unreliable. Investigators even put Condit's wife, Carolyn, in the crosshairs of suspicion at one point, though she, like her husband Gary, had an alibi.
And while police and the media remained focused on Condit, Gwandike sat in jail, out of sight.
3 months after Chandra's disappearance, the Metro Police turned their focus to Gwandike, but only because they'd heard that an informant claimed Gwandike had confessed to murdering Chandra. They decided to start by going straight to Gwandike and ask for an interview. He agreed to talk to them, but he said he'd only seen Chandra on TV and that he didn't know anything about her. Of course, that's not what he told the park police. But the park police never committed that statement to writing, so the Metro Police never knew, and that made the statement useless. The investigators looked into the informant who claimed Gwandike had confessed. He had serious credibility problems. A 5-time convicted felon with a long history of gang activity, the informant claimed Gwandike said Gary Condit hired him to kill Chandra. Though the detectives had been fixated on Condit, even they didn't buy that fishtail. Plus, the informant failed his polygraph exam.
Tim Hafey again. What's your view, first of all, on jailhouse informants?
prosecutors have to be very, very suspicious of jailhouse informants. There are a lot of people in jail who ear hustle, right? They listen to chatter, they read the newspaper, and they try to come up with theories and information that could get them a break. The only way I would ever use an informant of any kind is with corroboration. You just really can't rely on something that you hear from a jailhouse informant unless there's objective evidence to demonstrate that he or she is reliable and is telling the truth.
Gwandike took a polygraph too, but he spoke no English. He had to take the test through an interpreter. The results were inconclusive. But for some reason, the examiner concluded the polygraph showed no deception. So, relying in large part on the polygraph expert's opinion, the police eliminated Gwandike as a suspect.
Now, as we've been getting into polygraphs in this episode, I'm going to pause right here to talk about polygraph exams.
Polygraph results are not allowed in criminal courts. There are a whole lot of things that can go wrong in the administration of a polygraph exam, in part because the accuracy of the result depends on the skill of the examiner. Questions have to be worded correctly. The examiner has to set up all the monitors properly, and he has to present a neutral, non-threatening attitude. A mistake in any of these areas can yield the wrong result. And even when everything's done right and the test is properly administered, experts can come to very different conclusions about what the results show. I've seen it happen that one examiner says the results were inconclusive, while another examiner says they show the person was clearly deceptive.
Bottom line, polygraphs are most useful when they create a situation where the person confesses.
So, for the police in the Levy case to rely so heavily on the examiner's claim was a mistake, and not the only one. The police never bothered to interview the two women Gwandike attacked in Rock Creek Park. That was a big loss, because those women actually wanted more serious charges to be filed. Gwandike's attorney claimed he'd only intended to rob them, but both women pointed out that he never attempted to steal their Walkman players. They said that the way he'd attacked them made them feel like he'd intended to rape them and possibly kill them, not rob them. Still, the prosecution didn't think there was enough evidence to prove that, so they let Gwandike plead guilty to robbery and assault. He was sentenced to 10 years. At that point, Chandra Levy had been missing for 8 months. It would take another 4 months for her body to be found, and not by the police, but by a man who was walking through Rock Creek Park with his dog looking for turtles. He spotted what looked like a human skull, half buried in the leaves and plant debris. Dental records confirmed it was Chandra. But by that point, it had been a year since she disappeared. Her body had completely decomposed. All that was left were bones. It was difficult to determine the cause of death.
More on that after the break. So I'm sitting here with my friend Epi. We are looking at this new podcast that is so cool. What do you think of it, Epi?
I need to know more right now of all the things that, are trafficked internationally. Drugs, guns, art.
Exactly. From the creators of Missing Maura Murray and Crawlspace comes Empty Frames, a new investigative podcast aiming to find answers to one of the biggest mysteries the world has ever seen. In the early morning hours of March 18, 1990, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, Massachusetts fell victim to the most audacious art heist in modern history. In 81 minutes, two thieves dressed as policemen made off with 13 pieces of artwork with an estimated value of $500 million. Anyway, they stole works by Vermeer, Degas, and Rembrandt, never to be seen by the public again. Vermeer's The Concert was among the stolen pieces, and it's considered to be the most valuable stolen property in the world. Deep within the criminal underground, theories of their whereabouts and those who perpetrated the heist are abundant. In Empty Frames, Tim and Lance from the popular true crime podcast Missing Maura Murray and Crawlspace will dive into the case, exploring all angles. Along with investigators, reporters, art theft experts, and citizens, they're going to paint their own portrait comprised of the theories and the social and economic impact the greatest unsolved art heist of all time had on a community. So search and subscribe to Empty Frames today on Apple Podcasts or your favorite listening destination.
Oh, I'm already there.
Sold. And we're back with Marcia Clark Investigates the First 48, the podcast.
The coroner found no evidence that might indicate Chandra had been shot or stabbed. And based solely on her remains, the possibility that she'd fallen and died accidentally couldn't be ruled out. But Dr. Cyril Wett, a highly experienced pathologist who had been hired by the Levy family conducted a second autopsy, and he detected evidence of damage to her hyoid bone, which is located in the neck area. Damage to the hyoid bone usually means death was caused by strangulation. He concluded Chandra was likely strangled to death. There was more. A search of the area where her bones were found turned up her t-shirt, her sneakers, her leggings, and a Walkman. Remember, the two women Gwandike attacked in the park had been wearing a Walkman. And in both of those instances, Gwandike had left the Walkman behind, on the ground. The condition of Chandra's clothing gives an even clearer picture of what happened to her. Her t-shirt was turned inside out. Her sneakers were untied. And her leggings, there was a knot tied in each leg, as though the leggings had been used to restrain her. Her clothing and the Walkman tell the story her body could no longer tell.
That Chandra Levy was most likely attacked, sexually assaulted, and killed in Rock Creek Park.
And Gwandike lived within walking distance of the area where Chandra's remains were found. Then there's this. I asked investigators whether attacks on women were common in Rock Creek Park. They said no. In fact, they said crimes of violence in general were very rare. So the fact that in the month of May, Chandra Levy died there, and then 2 other women were attacked in the same area, was noteworthy. I should also tell you that 2 or 3 additional women came forward later and reported that they'd been attacked in the park around the same time and in a similar manner, possibly by Gwandike. So maybe as many as 6 women were attacked by Gwandike in Rock Creek Park. And I found a statement Gwandike made about the assaults in his pre-sentencing report. He said, quote, "When I'm about to commit an offense, I tell myself to go ahead and do it. But afterwards, I feel bad about it. Sometimes I cannot control myself when I see someone alone in a secluded area with something of value." End quote. I cannot control myself when I see someone in a secluded area. Maybe it's just me, but those words don't sound like someone who's only got robbery on his mind. And here's the thing. Once he'd been taken into custody, the assaults stopped. Now, all of this, other than the informant's testimony, is circumstantial evidence. In and of itself, it doesn't prove Gwandike is the killer. Still, it's compelling. It took 8 years for the Metro Police to put all of this together, to give up the chase after Gary Condit and issue an arrest warrant for Gwandike. They charged him with kidnapping, first-degree murder, attempted first-degree sexual abuse, and attempted robbery. The prosecution had no physical evidence that tied Gwandike to the murder. That ship sailed while the police focused on Gary Condit. So they relied on the testimony of the 2 women Gwandike had attacked, and the jailhouse informant who claimed Gwandike had confessed to killing Chandra. A juror on the case told me that the women's testimony, where they stated that they believed Gwandike intended to rape and kill them, was compelling, that it felt as though Chandra was speaking to them from the grave. She said the jury didn't think much of the jailhouse informant, that they didn't buy his story. So really, the pivotal evidence was the testimony of the 2 surviving victims. And it was very persuasive. The jury convicted Gwandike, and they convicted him of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 60 years. Finally, there was justice for Chandra Levy. Or so it seemed. In 2016, a witness came forward to say that the informant had lied about Gwandike's confession. That part of what she said did not turn out to be true. But evidence of another lie did turn up. During his trial testimony, the informant claimed he'd never offered information to law enforcement before. In fact, it was discovered that he'd given police information in exchange for a deal on several occasions, and that the prosecution may have had some knowledge about that, and that they deliberately avoided looking into it or telling the defense. If true, that's a pretty serious legal and ethical violation. These new revelations essentially shredded the informant's credibility. Tim Hafey again.
Yeah, that's crucial information, right? When you have an informant, every benefit that has been given to the informant is fair game for cross-examination. The more benefits he's been given, the more sort of bought and paid for he seems, and the more his credibility is affected. So not disclosing those benefits to the defense was understandably deemed a very material omission.
The judge threw out the conviction and granted the defense request for a new trial. But the prosecution was in no position to take Guandique to trial again. They couldn't use the informant. His credibility was shot. And since the informant's testimony was the only evidence that directly tied Guandique to Chandra Levy's murder, that effectively kneecapped the prosecution's case.
And then the office, I believe the U.S. Attorney's Office ultimately decided not to pursue the case because of that baggage that the informant carried and his lack of candor about the prior benefits that he'd been given. And without the informant, I believe they thought they had a harder time proving the case beyond a reasonable doubt.
Guandique finished serving his sentence for the attacks on the 2 women in Rock Creek Park and was deported back to El Salvador in 2017. At this point, Chandra Levy's murder remains officially unsolved, a cold case. There is one note of hope. The FBI still has Chandra's remains and her clothing that was found nearby. I'm sure they also have Guandique's DNA swab. It's been years since that evidence was last examined. DNA technology's advanced considerably since then. If the U.S. Attorney and the FBI would agree to take another look, they might just, at long last, solve this murder. And there would finally be justice for Chandra Levy.
Make a list of your assumptions, put them on a big sheet of paper, and tack it to the wall so that you will always remember what's an assumption and what is a fact. Because sometimes over time, these assumptions crystallize into becoming reality when they're not. I mean, there's no better case than the white van that didn't exist in the DC sniper case.
Wait,
another one is
Kim,
groupthink.
There was no white van? Seriously?
There was no white van.
As I mentioned earlier, I investigated the Chandra Levy case on my TV show, Marcia Clark Investigates the First 48, and I uncovered evidence that few people know about. It airs Thursday night at 9 p.m. on A&E, or you can find it online at aetv.com. So now, as promised, we're going to the mailbag. We're going to answer the questions you posed about last week's show, the Drew Peterson case.
You know, when I said I would do this, I had no idea there would be this many of them. And sadly, so many of your viewers are really smart, so you can't ignore them.
But now I have a feeling you're going to be asking for a pay hike.
Things could happen. Anyway, I mean, the vast number of questions were about Joel Brodsky.
Drew Peterson's lawyer.
Yeah, Drew Peterson's lawyer. I'm apparently not the only one who wants to squeeze that guy like a juice box, because he had a feeling Stacy would be found when Drew passed away. We just lost ourselves in this one. So, you know, why can't Brodsky be made to talk? What do you think?
Okay, it was stepping up to the line, ethically speaking, for Joel Brodsky to say that he knows where Stacy is because that knowledge would, well, most likely have come from his client, and it's privileged. You're not supposed to talk about anything your client tells you.
Yes, but we'd like to know anyway.
Yeah, we would like to know anyway, and we don't get to know anyway. Here's the thing. He probably shouldn't have said it. And what did he mean by it? It's my opinion that he maybe does know what happened to Stacy, and it might not have been information that came from Drew Peterson. He might know because he knows a witness who told him something in confidence. However, let me just say this. Okay. If it's Drew Peterson who told him what happened to Stacy, Joel Brodsky can never tell that unless he has an argument that says that the attorney-client privilege no longer exists when the client passes away. And if that's true, then he can talk about it. But we're not going to know until Drew passes away. So let's move on.
All right. Well, darn you, Joel Brodsky. So this is from Augie, who just kind of had a question I did too that was a little more casual. He wanted to know if you had met with or talked with Drew's other 2 wives.
I did not. We did reach out to them. They were not interested in being on camera and talking about Drew Peterson.
Now, Shuba, forgive me if I'm not getting your name right, she found it really interesting, or he, again, I apologize, found it a bit strange that when Stacy's sister went to the police department first and then said she went to the Peterson residence, why wouldn't she call it Stacy's house or Stacy's home? Do you think that indicates some kind of distancing about who really owns what, or you just think she was being formal because she was going to the police? Or
Yeah, I just think she was being formal. She was talking to the police. I don't think there's any particular significance to that.
Shuba also wanted to know, why didn't Stacy's sister just drop in and see if Stacy was okay or what was going on after she didn't answer her phone a few times? Why didn't she do any of that before she kind of officially reported her missing?
I think she felt already that things were very suspicious, and I think she was afraid, I would be, of what was going on with Drew. She did go to the door, ultimately. She went to the door, and she found Drew there, and Drew gave her a bullshit story about, Stacy's gone and all that.
Now I'm going to piggyback a little bit on a question from Charles. I had some question, and this just could be my not quite understanding, which applies to so many things in life, about Tom Morphy, Drew's stepbrother. He did mention that he was in the park, that Drew dropped him off in the park for an hour with a cell phone. Why did he take him to that park? Was he just buying time to go get rid of the barrel?
So, no. So this is something that we couldn't include in the TV show. Okay, so what happened was Drew Peterson left Thomas Morphy in the park with Drew's phone, telling him, "Don't answer it. I'll be right back." About an hour later, Drew's phone rings, and the call was coming from Stacy's phone. But Morphy didn't follow directions. He answered the call and got 30 seconds of dead silence on the phone, and then the call cuts off. The point of doing that was to show that Stacy had run off with her boyfriend, because Drew deliberately made the call to his own phone with Stacy's phone from the neighborhood where her supposed boyfriend lived. So he took her phone out to that area, made the call from the boyfriend's area to his own phone, so there would be a record showing Stacy calling him from the area where her boyfriend lived, and that would support the claim that she ran away and she wasn't dead. Morphy kind of screwed it up a little bit by answering the call, but the cell phone pings are still going to show on the records that Stacy's phone called Drew's phone from a place where her boyfriend lived.
So I know the cops were certainly called out, with Kathleen Savio, and that they went out 18, 19 times or something. I mean, were they covering up for this guy?
I don't think so in this case necessarily, because I don't think anybody was in love with Drew Peterson at the cop shop. I think probably the bigger problem was that it was a nasty divorce. She called a whole lot. It was hard for people to believe that he was as bad as she was claiming. And Drew, played his cards right, because he called the police too. So he turned it into what appeared to be a he said, she said.
Okay. There's another question about the initial coroner who said Kathleen's death was an accidental drowning. Is it common for coroners to have such hugely different findings?
I don't think it's all that common to have such a big discrepancy between accident and murder. I think the first medical examiner missed a few things, honestly. And when I talked to Larry Blum, who did the second autopsy, he talked about the ways in which, certain things had been missed and needed to be re-examined, and were, after the exhumation and second autopsy, other things were found that probably should have been found to begin with. But, people make mistakes. Anyway, I guess that wraps it up for today. You guys send in your questions, call in your questions. We will be glad to answer all of them. We'll answer them at the end of next week's show. Just call 402-882-6474. That's 4028-VANISH. Email us at marciaclarkpodcast@aenetworks.com. Next week, Robert Blake.
Marcia Clark Investigates the First 48, the podcast. Hosted by Marcia Clark. Produced by Emil Klein and Chelsea Great. Research by Robin Kiyomi. Supervising producer is Scott Brody. Executive producers are Marcia Clark, Ted Butler, and Peter Tarshis.
Thanks to Larry and Kristen.
Music is by Blake Maples.
Special thanks to Rob Wood, our gaffer. Thank goodness the fire department was only a few blocks away.
We're distributed by Audio Boom. The TV series Marcia Clark Investigates the First 48 is produced by ITV and airs at 9 p.m. Thursdays on A&E. Find out more at aetv.com.
But hang on. Any information, communications, or material you submit to the Marcia Clark Investigates the First 48 podcast by email, download, telephone, or otherwise is non-confidential, and AETN is free to use and reproduce such submission freely and for any purpose. Please see the site for complete submission terms.